Hey guys, it's Broken Angel, and we are continuing on with Ebon Light. So let's load this up. Yes, that's right. We were taken to that guy with the long blonde hair. So I climbed out of bed and laid my bare feet on the cold floor. Let's search the bedroom. The room I was in was pristine and extravagantly decorated. I was worlds away from Aunt Vanya's hut in Edric. There was a dresser, a nightstand, and a dressing table with multiple narrow drawers. Examine the dresser. I ran my hand across the surface of the dresser, a soft, delicate wood. My hand fell to the handle of the drawer and I gave a gentle tug. The drawer gave quite a thump. It was locked. I couldn't see or feel a place for a key. It was perhaps locked another way. Force it open. The wood felt soft, so I gave the dresser a strong tug. The drawer slammed against its internal mechanism, the soft wood crunching. The drawer felt looser, closer to giving. I gave it another tug. This time a quiet crack allowed the drawer to slide open. When I looked inside the drawer, I found a silky, translucent cloth wrapped around the form of a tiny box. I gently pulled the cloth away, so soft to touch it seemed to melt between my fingers. The box, once revealed, was built into the bottom of the drawer. It had a delicate lid inlaid with painted colours of red and green that slid open with slight pressure. Inside the box I found a loose, tiny, iridescent scales and rings and pendants made out of the same scales. I just noticed here how it has noise level. I'm not sure if that alerts the other characters or not, but that's interesting. One of the rings stood out among them all, carelessly tossed into a corner yet still utterly captivating. The ring had a scale band of red and blue, wrapping up around the finger, topped with a small orb that seemed to maintain a very subtle glow. Ooh, do we take the ring and hide it? Take it and wear it? Well, that would be a bit obvious. People would know you stole it. Let's take it and hide it. I decided to take the ring, thinking it would be wiser to cover the tracks of my theft. I slid the drawer closed after replacing everything the way I had found it, and looked around for somewhere to hide my prize. Let's go with examine the room's artwork. I took some time to examine the room's artwork. There were statues and statuettes on most of the surfaces. The walls covered in paintings, even the draperies seemed to tell a story. I noticed that each extravagant piece was deceptive at first. The pieces seemed grand and happy, but only until I looked at them closer. Then they became morbid, sinister. Eye of the beholder, perhaps? Go to the window. I approached the room window and peered outside. There was a garden, a low fence, and beyond that, a city street. What I could see of the city in the moonlight. It was overwhelming, towering, dark spires stretching toward the sky, the highest of which disappeared completely into the sky. The window itself was latched shut. It would be easy to open. Ooh, so are we trying to escape? Open the window. I unlatched the window, guiding it to gently swing open. The night air pushed in with unexpected force. It was windier outside than I realized. I gripped the windowsill and leaned outside the room, briefly considering running out into the city. But no, not in this nightgown. It was far too cold and it was far too unknown. Who's to say what was out there was safer than what's in here? When I leaned back inside, I noticed that I had put my hand in some sort of sticky residue. Ew. It was dark, like sap, and in a house and room so utterly pristine, it was suspiciously out of place. Curious. Perhaps I should close the window, though it would probably be trickier to shut quietly than it had been to open quietly. Oh, okay. Yes, leave it open. Oh, my noise thing just went up too. I decided to leave it open. how about we leave the bedroom? Would we get in trouble for doing that? The bedroom door was unlocked and opened mercifully without a creak. Outside the bedroom, I found myself in a hall that extended far both to my left and right. I could see a faint light coming from somewhere down the hall to my left, while to my right, I could only see a dark series of doors, just like the one I exited. Let's go to the right. I decided to head down the right hall. The hall was dark and quiet. I felt relatively certain I was safe and alone. As I headed down the hall, I passed a series of doors that all looked similar. When I finally came to an entrance that was remarkably different from the rest, I paused in front of it and considered trying to enter. This room had 2 doors, framed in an ornate, pretentious design. Enter the double door. The doors were heavier than the bedroom door had been. But inside, the room was much too dark to see anything. I thought I could make out the shape of drapes, and I could perhaps venture inside, pull them open, and let in the moonlight. Yeah, venture in. Why not? Is that a skull? That's another one. Oh God. I took a deep breath and made my way into the quiet, dark room. I headed straight for what I hoped was a window. I reached out my hands in the darkness, brushing them lightly across the fabric texture of window drapes. I felt a wink of relief as I pulled the drapes open. Oh, yep. Unmistakably human, or at least something very similar to human, 3 skulls were propped up like trophies on a table. The skulls were preserved, pristine, the pale bones shining in the moonlight. Where was I? Who are these people? Examine the skulls. I approached the 3 skulls carefully. They were indeed trophies. Something else? The rest of the room seemed normal enough. More of the odd, extravagant artwork. Some chaises and chairs, large windows and books. It seemed almost like a study. Nothing else seemed so out of place as the 3 skulls did, and closer examination provided no further explanations as to why they were being displayed as they were. They must be trophies of a sort. What kind of person keeps skulls in their study as a trophy? After trying to discover something noteworthy about the skulls for a time and failing, I made my way out of the room, finding nothing else remarkable about it. So I'm assuming once the noise level hits like maybe really, really high, then we'll get caught. So I'm going to head back. Let's take a peek at the left. I steeled myself and carefully made my way down the left hall as quietly as I could. The closer I got to the light, the clearer the sound of a fire crackling. Drawing closer still, an exuberant smell took over my senses. Something was being cooked. Something which smelled delicious, and to a stomach as bare as mine, utterly intoxicating. I inched my way to the very edge of the open archway. Just inside the warm glow, the delicious smell. Peek in? Oh jeez. Unable to restrain myself, I carefully peered into the room with the glorious smell. Before me, I saw a large kitchen. A large fire was responsible for the bright glow, and just above the fire, a pot, where no doubt the food could be found. My appetite, as ravenous as it was, I couldn't restrain myself any longer. I quickly made my way into the room where I was inexplicably alone, and helped myself to the soup bubbling in the pot. Nothing was ever more delicious. We're already at 9. I think we should head back. I backtracked until I was once again in front of my bedroom door. Head back into the bedroom. I turned back into the bedroom, quietly letting myself back in. Attempt to get back into bed. My belly full, I felt confident I could lay in bed until morning. I laid in bed, closed my eyes, and kept very still. But my mind refused to let me fall back to sleep. As I kept quiet for hours, staying still as best as I could, I felt restless, aches in every bone. I must have been asleep for days. I'd thought about giving up the ruse many times over, making my way back out into the hall until I found someone, with a perverse sort of hopefulness. Oh my god. I listened intently as each sound outside my door paused, shuffled, and continued. A part of me was even eager to be discovered. Finally, I heard my room's door open. I kept very still. I heard the soft steps of someone drawing closer. "And how are you today, Zalaria? Still sleeping?" A man sighed. I didn't open my eyes just yet. If I was going to pretend to wake naturally, or if I was going to wait to try and escape in the daylight. Well, what's this? I felt my body tense. What had he found? There was silence for a brief time, then I heard the sound of the dresser drawer being opened and closed. Uh-oh. Did he know I'd... This is certainly mysterious. It didn't sound like he was talking to himself, nor did his tone have the same whimsy it had when he first entered. He was certainly talking to me now, certain that I could hear. "I'm sure you have questions, Zalaria, as do I." Act confused? Where am I? Vanya once, in a moment of questionable parentage, taught me to lie. I had a knack for it. That said, the elf didn't seem to be buying my act for a second. "Where are you? You're in my home. Did you not help yourself to a thorough enough tour?" "I don't understand." "Ah, well, perhaps not. You have been acting exceptionally odd, though for good reason." I had contracted Lace to retrieve the Kuthental. I certainly did not expect that would come in the form of you. Now that it has, whether either of us likes it, we both forced to adapt to the situation as we can. Why do I get the feeling I'm not going to like this? It seems I am at mercy either way. This doesn't need to be unpleasant. We can be a benefit to one another. If you adjust particularly well, you might not need me in the end. You might find yourself thriving beyond all expectation. And should you harbor desire for revenge against Lace or myself, at that point, we'd be at your mercy. And why would you ever let me out of your control? I again remind you that you are hardly in chains, but you, with the Kuthental, are an ancient fire. It makes you unknown. You can trust that, if nothing else, I intend to treat it with careful reverence. And you have information about what's happening to me? Some. Not as much as I'd have liked, but I would be happy to share what I know. I've had healers compiling theories since before you arrived. We have an idea what to be wary of, but it's not all for loss. Healers? Have I been ill? You're unique. You've been sleeping, but you haven't displayed any other signs of particular concern. Then what are you looking out for? It's all theory, ideas formed from broken remnants of history, but it's rather exciting. For every threat you face, there is the possibility of remarkable power. What kind of power? The warriors who'd taken Kuthental were stronger than their peers. As vague as our records are, what most of the writings have in common is the idea that the Kuthental is a key to some greater threshold beyond oneself. Now, what could that mean? If they were stronger, faster, smarter, if they understood things or saw things that we normally don't, there are dozens of suggestions. I would be happy to go over them individually with you later. What do you mean, see things that we normally don't? That specific reference comes from an almost entirely destroyed manuscript. What I've already said of it is about all there is to say. When was it destroyed? Ages ago. It seems it was damaged shortly after it was made. He smiles. Do you have an interest in Galian history? If only for obvious reasons. Of course, I would feel the same. Fortunately, researching my people's obscure and muddied past is a hobby of mine. For now, we'll have to wait and see what fantastic abilities you manifest. I began to feel overwhelmed, and my world began to get hazy again. While I wanted more information, the more I heard, the more difficult it became to listen. Dulier smiled in a way I assume was meant to be comforting. Perhaps it would be better to pace this out, take a chance to reacquaint yourself with the waking world, and I will gather the information I've collected and present it to you this evening. You can have the run of the estate in the meantime. Sure, okay. Very well. In the meantime, do as you please. I would suggest staying on the estate, but as I said, I am not your keeper. Perhaps you'd like some air out in the garden? What passes for a garden in the mouth of the city, anyway? Oh, and Zalaria, do you recall meeting an elf named Harren when you were aboard the Bastion? Harren? Young, pleased with himself? Yes, I met him. Dulier sighs. Harren and Ernal will be over this evening. Harren's been relentlessly trying to get an audience with you. He's been at it for days now. They're bringing over their own records concerning the Kuthental. I suspect you'd be interested. 2 birds, 1 stone. Is knowing Harren a problem? Is there something about Harren I should know? No, if you sense some irritation in my tone, it is simply that I find his eagerness cumbersome. But he shouldn't be a problem, though between you and me, I had hoped he was embellishing the extent of your relationship. Embellishing? I'd only met him briefly. Is that so? Yes? Something to mention later this evening, If you need anything, there are servants about that can assist you. Somewhere. I spent the rest of the day in the room I woke up in. My room, as Dulier called it. A daze lingered while I tried to prepare myself for dinner with the elves. What answers could I hope to get from these elves? Dulier seems as trustworthy as a golden snake in a wheat field. From what I could remember of Harren and Ernal, Harren's mind is scattered and difficult to place, and Ernal is hardly my ally. If the Kuthental is so mysterious and so unknown, did they even have answers to give? I felt a certain dread, both in suspecting I'd never get answers, and in fearing that I would. Knowing exactly what it was that nestled in my belly, slithered around in my veins, stirred up my head. Zalaria? I looked toward the voice and immediately felt weary. A woman entered my room without waiting for a reply and stood before me. I'd never seen her before. She wore an unfriendly expression. There's precious little solace to be had around here without strangers barging into your bedroom. And... You are Zalaria? No, never mind. That's idiotic. Of course you are. They aren't any other humans running through Dulier's estate. Excuse me? What do you want? I wanted to get a look at you. And? Am I on display? Not as such. Not yet. What is that supposed to mean? She shrugged her shoulders. It means about what you'd expect. I wouldn't be surprised if you did become a sort of exhibition. Yeah, whatever. By the time this is all through. And you wanted an early viewing? Something of a trendsetter, are we? Ha! Her smile lingered for a moment, then it faded into a pained expression. There's not really anything I can do for you. Dulier can't even do much. He tries to act like he can do anything, but the Kuthental really wasn't meant for a human. Her tone had shifted, no longer flippant and aggressive, but sad and conflicted. And the truth is, it's not just the Kuthental, it's Galia. I took a deep breath and focused carefully on the woman who'd still not introduced herself. What do you think will happen to me? What do you think will be done to me then? What? If you go mad and die, or if Galia gets you? Galia gets me. Galia? A derisive snort came out of the strange woman. They take whatever they want. What they'll want from you is your power, your capacity for destruction. By the way, dinner is almost ready. Look in your dresser. The woman stepped back outside the room. Wait a minute. Hey, you're just going to leave? No response. Well then, the dresser. From the window in my room, the sky had turned lighter grey, only to darken again. The wet haze outside thus far had been a gloomy constant. There were few windows in Dulier's house, and the interior was mostly black, so inside was always dark. The maid who'd fetched me said only 2 words to me, come, and of course then tried a true favourite, human. She led me through the house until we came to a pair of large doors. She stopped in front of one and waited for me to open the other. Before me I saw Dulier, Harren, Ernol, and Skylar in the extravagant dining hall all turn their heads toward me immediately. Zelaria! Harren rose from his seat and began to approach. Ernol wasn't long behind, though his interest seemed to be containing Harren more than anything. Are you alright? Locked away in this ghastly man's tower, this is almost too ridiculous to believe. Harren, you promised. Ghastly? All things considered, I can think of far more ghastly keepers than Dulier. You do me too much credit, Zelaria. It would be a simple matter to swarm the place with soldiers, majorly. Just say the word. She's not captive, Harren. Indeed. Now, if you want her to be a captive, by all means, swarm the place with soldiers. There are soldiers looking to capture me? Not proactively, not at the moment. However, should you be conveniently delivered to the forces, I very much doubt they'd let you go. Doesn't that make more sense than trying to figure out what to do with her all on your own, Dulier? You underestimate me. Shouldn't we be letting her decide? I think I'll stay here for now. As best as I can tell, I should stay here for now. And really, if you're trying to push her into making a decision that might well affect her remainder of her life, shouldn't she at least have the information we gathered to give her first? I nodded. What I wanted to know right now was everything I could about the Kuthental. The rest, well, one battle at a time. It's time I understood what was going on. Your constitution seems to have returned. As though her lack in constitution were ever more than an excuse to keep her where you wanted. Harren. The brothers brought their father's collection of ancient Gallian texts. It's very fortunate. I've been after these texts for decades, but with you here now, there's no time to be timid. Please don't touch. Lomra is, well, fun as it might be to upset his collection, these are precious artifacts, and aggravating him any more than necessary is a hassle none of us need right now. Truly, my father isn't aware Harren and I stole the ancient Kuthental texts, but what are they good for if not something like this? I saw the text splayed across the table. Truth be told, I was wondering when the ancient tomes would show up. There were also other artifacts, some small statuettes, a chain and a pendant, and other bits of jewellery. My attention was primarily focused on a vile-looking dagger. I appreciate your assistance. I hope it doesn't get you into trouble. Of course, Madrilli. Trouble is no trouble. Ah yes, no trouble. Not if you're touched in the head. Hopefully, it at least does some good. Please remember that none of this can possibly be conclusive unless you yourself can confirm it. These texts and places contradict each other, and there's no way to guarantee the authenticity of any one thing over another. All of what any of us know about the Kuthental is like that. In a way, you are closer than any of us to knowing the truth. But I understand very little. Maybe that is true right now, but it will change. So let us begin. The Kuthental traces back to the very beginning of our society, of Galia. It is one of the oldest and one of the only surviving traces we have of where we came from. By all accounts, it seems certain that the intention of the Kuthental was to ultimately give a being power. But as with most great powers, the path to the Kuthental secrets came with it. Came with a catch, if you will. There always is. It is referred to multiple times throughout multiple volumes that the power from the Kuthental is an exchange. Unfortunately, further elaboration on what exactly that means what is being exchanged with who, can only be guessed at. Do you have an idea what the exchange means? Ernol's question caught me off guard. I have no idea. I don't have any ideas. I haven't exchanged anything I know of. What could that even mean? That's certainly the question. So while we don't know what might be or must be exchanged for the Kuthental's power, we do know that the power the Kuthental gave was extraordinary. The reverence, the awe, and the dread are nearly universal. There is something fantastic behind the Kuthental, and it is something that shaped the beginning of our people. Listen! All of us switch our focus to Skylar, who'd snuck off to look over one of the ancient texts. Let us not be consumed before our task is complete. Let us not step too far into the realm of the... Skylar. I'm trying. I haven't seen this word before. It looks like flame or smoke, but... Let me see. I've never seen this before either. How would you say that, Dulier? I stared intently at the two elves, waiting with absolutely no patience for them to continue. Perhaps... Oh, here. There was excitement in Dulier's voice. We are weightless, where they are heavy. Heavy? Yes. Does that mean something to you? It might. He nods at me slowly and continues to read. We abandon ourselves and become something new. The best of us can become whole again. And then Skylar took over. But for every heavy fist, another 5 disappear, claimed by the... that word again. Smoke? It's in tune with the others. The Kuthental claims far more than it elevates. Don't be grim, Ernol. The rest of the passage is spent talking about nothing relevant. Names of the dead? Dulier gave Skylar a frightful look. What? She should know. Harren tapped his finger on a pendant he wore. Perhaps the smoke is the madness, all the elves succumbing to smoke, fog, haze, madness? And if madness was so prevalent among those involved with the Kuthental, who's to say those who wrote the text themselves were not mad? Whoever wrote this is making up words, isn't he? Not necessarily. It's an old dialect. It's possible the word was lost. If you apply it to the rest, perhaps it's suggesting those who master the Kuthental are powerful because they can change themselves. Step back out of the fog. Is that what you took from that? While Dulier and Ernol spoke, I felt Harren and Skylar's gaze on me. What do you think, Harren? Harren? I think you've already beaten the odds, Majuli. What you're hearing is your success, not your downfall. That seems too optimistic. I hope you're right, Harren. Thanks for saying so anyway. Of course. We're leaving the text with Dulier for the next few weeks. Skylar and Dulier can comb over it extensively in the meantime. Assuming, of course, well, my point was that this is likely your best chance at finding answers. For one reason or the next, this was not at all comforting. Are you leaving? Ernol nodded. We aren't really useful to the effort, not beyond stealing from our father. And Dulier knows everything we do already. Oh, are you leaving, Harry? I don't know what to say. Do you have to? Must you leave? I could tell right away Ernol was surprised. I glanced at Dulia and Skylar, who'd both returned to scouring over the text Skylar had found. You just what? I feel better with more people. I just prefer to be in a crowded room than alone with elves, Gallian elves, no less, but you'll be fine. Dulia means to take care of you, and there's nothing out there that will treat you any better. Harren looked considerably more conflicted to leave, but parted with the sincere promise of I'll be back, coupled with that Madrilee word of his. Maybe I'd ask him about it sometime. Bye, guys. With the brothers gone, Dulia and Skylar continued their research. They tried to enlighten me on occasion, but their references were obscure and only seemed to add more pieces to the puzzle. I began to fade, so I returned to my room. My head was feeling heavy, my mind foggy, my body numb. They were waiting to see what would happen to me, waiting for their own answers. In the middle of the night, there was a light tapping at my window. When I woke, I found myself atop the blanket of my bed, still wearing the clothes I'd been wearing the evening prior. I rose and moved toward the window, searching for the source of the tapping. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, nothing that could explain the noise. Strange. I found myself staring at the foggy, dark silhouettes of the city, a thought I had the night before returned to me. There, outside the window, was freedom. Perhaps not safety or assurance, but freedom from others making decisions for me. From this immediate hold. Dulier would have me believe that here with him is the only chance I've got. But what does his word count for? If I believed him, I'd stay right here where he wants me. But why should I believe him? A city on an island full of strange beings. There really was nowhere to run. The hell? Hallie, grow! I heard a shout. It was far away, but loud enough to hear it through the walls. They sounded angry. The hell? Rockfuss? Whose voice was it? It didn't sound like any of the elves I'd met, but I couldn't be sure. Not through the walls. Do you really think the Onyx Chandler is going to defy the Grand General? He's not the fool that you are. The half-human returned to her human tongue. Stop your meddling. I know that the Kuthentor woman is here. They were louder now, closer, and speaking my language. I recognized Skylar's voice, but now I was certain that the second came from someone unfamiliar. I have nothing to hide, Gravelor. Gravel? Yeah, Gravel. Whatever. Dulier. He spoke just out my door. Doesn't saw you bring her here. Where is she? You frontal cruciru. They switched back to their own language, but I understood that they were coming for me. Any moment now. I looked again at my window. Escape. I pushed open the window and swung my feet out, jumped down into the dark garden, and then I ran. The streets outside Dulier's home were mostly empty but not complete. Oh, rain. And rain, of course, there was rain. This is pretty. Not far down the street, I could see an approaching crowd. They were coming fast. They hadn't spotted me yet, but drawn as they were to Dulier's house and the commotion therein, I didn't think it would take them long to spot me. Gallian elves as a whole seemed predatory in nature. Besides, I was hardly hidden, just a dripping, freezing, frazzled human who swallowed the Kuthental. So I hurried away from the house, doing my best to make as little a spectacle of myself as possible. I didn't know where I was going, but any distance between myself and those who'd come for me was good enough. The streets were nearly empty, and before too long I came to the docks. The large shipping crates seemed abandoned for the rainy night, and I thought the crates a good place to hide, as good as I thought I'd get. I crouched down. While I was certain I'd manage to make it to the docks unfollowed, I immediately spotted the sight of a silhouette. A chill ran down my spine. I waited and watched, searching for any indication that he was aware of me. It became clear that he was. Confront him? What do you want? The elf stepped toward me, his face catching light so I could make out his features. He wore a small smile but said nothing. What do you want? Fear poisoned my voice. In an instant I was exposed, trembling. My father used to tell me stories about the Kuthental, the way it would change an elf if he was strong, the way it would change him if he was weak. The Kuthental, he knew? You know about the Kuthental? How do you know about? He laughs, a sour laugh at my expense. What do you mean? It's not a secret. And it is a small island. Then tell me, what do you want? Then let's get to it. I planted my feet hard in the ground, straightened my spine, and projected my voice. What do you want? I thought carefully how to approach this elf. I felt extremely uneasy around him, and considering my company of late, that was saying something. What is it exactly that you want from me? I want to know if what they say is true. I felt another wave of apprehension. I wasn't sure what he meant, nor how I could ever provide proof of anything. He took another step closer. I knew then that he intended to hurt me, and he was too close to run from. Bargain, plea, or attack. Wait, you don't have to do this. I don't? She doesn't bear negligence well. I could barely hear what he said, my mind too busy racing for something I could offer him in exchange for my life. But I could think of nothing. I had nothing. This had turned out about as I expected. At hearing his voice, a part of me thought I was saved. Another thought my demise had just been made all the more certain. Lace? I saw his face twitch. Lace, perhaps I'll save Ekre the trouble? Ekare, sorry. Gosh. Don't overstep, Lace. You're in enough trouble as it is. Matwain doesn't notice my missteps any more than she notices yours. What could she possibly want with a dying rabbit? It doesn't matter what she wants, it only matters that she wants it. I wasn't sure what was happening, but much like being caught between the teeth of two wearing wolves, I wanted to be far from both of them. And yet, though it was almost too ridiculous to acknowledge, a part of me thought Lace was defending me. At the very least, he was here to savour his own kill. Dulier was preparing her for the Grand General, so your options here are to walk away intelligently. I'll let him know, or pit my employer against yours. The stranger snorted. The Onyx Chandler has grown awfully proud if he thinks his reach extends to her. Lace stayed quiet, for some reason looking a touch smug, and the stranger had a confusing expression of his own. But all you want is tonight, alright? Encourage him to make bold moves. His downfall has been a long time coming. As you say. Lace mumbled something in his native language. Move. Wait a minute. Wait, what? What? What just happened? What was that all about? Galian politics. Start moving. I'm not one for standing in the rain. No, explain now. No, Lace, tell me. Lace stayed silent and still for a breath and sighed and looked back at me. The Grand General wants you. I'm not sure in what fashion. He is the most powerful entity in Galia, though. Dulier has ways of subverting his attention. How successful Dulier will be in this time, we'll have to wait and see. It bodes poorly for you either way. Why are you helping me? You still don't know? Dulier pays me. I see. Lest I forget. Let's go. Do I want to go back? They signaled the direction with his hand and waited for me to walk in front of him. We arrived at a small cabin which reminded me all too much of home. Lace deposited me into the cabin and then left it, all without saying a word. I'd begun to settle in a little by the time he came back in. There are harpies, but none too close. Harpies? Hadn't I mentioned? These woods are infested. Better count all your toes twice before you tuck yourself in tonight. I have all mine, but do you have all yours? Fine. All 12. Wait, 12? Elves have 12. You're not serious? He shrugged. More elves arrived in a group not very long after that. How are you holding up, Celeria? Better than you'd think. I'm not really sure how I got away unscathed, but Dulier smiled. Excellent. Galois, our Grand General, has sent his soldiers out to collect you for execution. He's not pleased with how popular you've become in the Galian rumour wind. Oh wow, then why are you all helping me? In that case then, I don't understand. Why aren't you handing me over to your Grand General? That's a good question. Because he wants to kill you, Madrilee. Some decisions we made, we must abide even when we do not agree, but there are others so unspeakably foolish. My grandfather has been making questionable decisions for some time now. It's treason. We have different motivations, but make no mistake about that. What do you mean by questionable decisions, Vade? Vade grew uncomfortable as his cousins and Lacey shifted their gaze to him. Galia has a monarchy, and if you hadn't noticed, it's through no fault of your own. The king is little more than a figurehead. My grandfather has grown increasingly bold in his reach. By and large, the people accept it as it falls in line with our beliefs. But some are starting to understand why a general is not always fit to be king. The way he's handling you is a fair example of that. Hasn't the king done anything? Why does the king allow this? The king is thoroughly intimidated by my grandfather. Most are. Not to use that as an excuse, he is far from an ideal king himself. Okay, surely something can be done. There must be some way to help. You would think so, Vade sighed. There are some things out in the horizon that may, one day, help improve things, but nothing that will help us now. And as you can see, we need help now. Alright, so what do we do? Then what's the plan? Vade and Lace are going to patrol the perimeter of this building. It's not difficult to draw connections to Lace from myself, so he'll have to be particularly subtle. Vade is far freer of suspicion, but we all have commitments. Lest we bring soldiers to you, you may be alone for a few days. Ernal and Harren aren't scouts. Their access to the woods will be limited. But they're doing what they can. Ernal is helping me, and Harren is plying his own resources. I'll be alone? In this cabin? For how long? Not for very long. If this goes on much longer than I expect, we'll find other arrangements for you. We'd have to. Scouts will be training in this area in 2 months, and 4 months after that is the Surus culling. Months? It won't be anything like that. Ideally, you'll be here for a few days. You'll have supplies. Lace and Vade will keep the perimeter safe, and the rest of us will work to pacify Galois. We will check in on you when it's safe to do so. How will I stay informed? And in the meantime, I'm in the dark. I'm to just hope you'll work it out. Zalaria, I'm not trying to keep things from you. This is your fate, and more than anyone else, you are invested. I recognize that. If there is news to be had, and we can get it to you, we will. But again, I do not intend for this to be longer than a brief stay. I sighed uncomfortably. I'll see what I can get with Zalaria. It's risky and unnecessary. But Harren said something might happen to her while she's alone. Just a blink ago, she was in and out of consciousness. Also, Dulier says, Dulier and your brother, but he's right. Although there was very little we could do for her before. All the same, I think it's worth the risk if you do, Zalaria. Lace and Vade could sneak back in with the most discretion. Vade, yes. Lacey, no. I would certainly not turn away your company, Vade. Though I'd sooner writhe here in agony alone than bear his presence any more than necessary. Lace snorted. Is that the sort of effect I have on you? My mood is improving. I understand completely. Try to keep your spirits up, Zalaria. We are far from having our backs to the wall. You're going to change things. You'll see. The elves grew quiet in the dusty, crowded cabin. I stole a few books around, trying to imagine what I was in for the next few days. These cabins are so small. Bigger than the hut Vanya and I shared, and big enough for the elves to split into two groups, Lace and Vade on one side, Dulier, Harren and Ernol to the other. The scouts were talking about the perimeter of the forest, and the other three seemed to be discussing strategies for outmaneuvering the general. All of them, save Lace, who would breach into Galian every few words, were speaking my language. I understood this to be for my benefit. Talk to Harren. Zalaria. I made the mistake of catching Harren's gaze from the other side of the cabin. He unceremoniously broke from the conversation he was in and approached me. Well, today has been eventful. You mean you don't do this every day? Not that I wouldn't like to. Ever since I met you, life has been significantly more exciting. You don't usually have occasion to come out to your infested woods? Every now and then, but the soldiers coming to collect you for assassination? Lace stealing you back from Ikare's clutches? It's astonishing. I'm only sorry to have missed it firsthand. You're way too excited about this. Are you always this excitable, Harren? Majorly, doesn't it seem to you that it's all coming together just so? If you don't believe that, then doesn't at least the thrill of getting away with the scandal? The scandal of the Kuthental in the heart of Galia with our Grand General at your heel, doesn't that excite you? No, it's terrifying. Excite me? You can't be serious. This is terrifying, Harren. This is by far the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I've nearly starved in the past, but this is something new altogether. Also unfathomable that I can barely breathe. Then, Madrily, yes, I'm sorry. He started to move closer, but then stopped himself. I didn't mean to cheapen your fear. I understand how extraordinary this is, thus how frightening it must be. But you'll get through it. I've got the sense that just over the horizon, things will brighten considerably. Do you think so? Yes, I can't say I've predicted what will become of you and the Kuthental, but I don't believe you'll be pursued anymore. I think you will do the pursuing. That would be a nice switch. I would welcome the change. Yes, would you seek revenge? To right the wrongs? To go home? To find answers? Probably find answers. I would find answers, and the end to all these carefully chosen half-truths and unknowns on this cryptic, confusing island. and I would know exactly what plagues me and why this happened in the first place. All answers I seek myself, and never doubt that should I learn anything, you are the first I would share it with. I nodded at him. Regardless of how fruitful his promise would be, I appreciated the sentiment. So take heart, don't let them manipulate you into obedience or being fearful when there was no cause. All will be well, Madrily. What is that word that you keep using? Alright, I have to ask, what does that word you keep saying mean? Madrily? He smiled, averting his gaze. It means something like shining light. Why do you call me that? It's what you are. I should at least keep an ear to whatever they're saying. He smiled at me and, looking very much reluctant, walked back toward Dulier and Ernol. Talk to Vade? The conversation Lacey and Vade were having appeared strained, to say the least. They weren't yelling, which, given their expressions, was something of a surprise, as though they were both exercising a great deal of control to keep from getting in each other's faces. I ventured a little closer and they both turned to look at me. I felt vaguely put on the spot. You're discussing your patrol around the cabin? Vade nodded quickly. Yes, we both have duties to attend, things we can't avoid if for appearances alone, so we're trying to divvy up the schedules. Is it not going well? Better without interruption. Vade's expression snapped, a scowl instantly on his face. With an abrupt scoff, Vade moved toward a corner of the cabin, ushering me along with him. Don't listen to him. You've had blow after blow today, I hear. I'm glad you got here safe. You're really beating the odds, Zelaria. Thank you for coming. Vade, I'm sure I don't fully understand what it means for each of you to be here yet, but I assume it's a significant sacrifice. And your kindness is welcome. And ever since we met, you've been caring and kind, things that seem very rare here. It's just good to see you. Though he seemed at a momentary loss for words, he smiled. Happy to help. Whatever I can do, let me know. I can't really give estimates on when exactly I'll be able to check in with you, and given that it might be any hour of the day, we should come up with some kind of signal. Something non-verbal would be best, in case subtly is important. How about 2 knocks on the door, a pause, 3 knocks on the door, a pause, 1 knock. 2, 3, 1. I'll make sure Lace keeps his distance. Besides, he won't know the password. He seemed a little more pleased with that than was strictly appropriate. Looking around this cabin is strange. Lace and I are working together on something strictly outside of duty. However doubtful I am on his intentions, that is strange enough. But Dulier and Harren, Callie and Ernol, I'm glad there is so much interest in the Guthental, if only for your sake. But know that I'll do what I can to get you back home, Zelaria. I need to finish sorting this out with Lace. I don't want to go home. His brows flew up in surprise. You don't? You want to stay here? Oh, I don't know if that's what I want, but I don't want to go home. Oh, I just assumed. Well, that changes things, huh? He gave me one last smile and made his way back to his prior discussion. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to Ernol. Ernol? His attention shifted over to me in surprise. After a brief hesitation, he stepped away from Dulier and Harren and approached me. You know, when you left Dulier's house, we were scrambling to find you. Lace managed to get to you first, but do you know who that elf was? The one who cornered you on the docks? Akare, an assassin. This is a mess. We all seem to be working together, it's not so bad. On the other hand, consider that all of us here seem to be in accord, and I'm still alive. Something is working. He peered at me in silence as though trying to understand something that had thus far confounded him. We'll see if your confidence is warranted. It seemed to me he thought I knew something he didn't, or at least suspected it. It's very dangerous out here, but if you fortify the cabin when we leave and you keep quiet and out of sight, and as you said, we have this assembly of people in addition to Callie's aid, you'll have a fighting chance at least. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, you know. Dulier isn't very straightforward. Your brother is so wrapped up in his excitement. You're blunt, and that's sort of comforting. A slow smile crept across Ernal's face, and I found one of my own to match. I guess we're alike in a way. I vastly prefer the truth, cold as it is sometimes. I wonder what else we have in common. I couldn't guess. Let's see, how do you feel about extremely sharp, fragile blades? I've always preferred ranged weapons. I mean, personally, I've always liked using a bow, but, you know. I'm gonna say I love them. I've always wanted a sharp, smooth blade. Mew, hold them just so, and they sing. He looks surprised. Where did you learn that? My aunt. He laughed abruptly, loud enough to turn a few heads. He quickly quieted himself. I'll let you get back to your conversation. Yes, that's probably for the best. Those two make questionable decisions sometimes. He stole another glance at Harren and Dulier, then looked back at me. Keep your wits about you. We'll be back for you soon. Okay, find somewhere to sit. You're done talking. I glanced around the cabin again in one final exhausted sweep before taking a seat on one of the cabin's 3 beds. This was where I would be spending my next few days. After the elves left, I did my best to get comfortable. I couldn't help but notice the similarities to the cabin I grew up in. Helpfully, there were still certain stark differences that kept the illusion at bay. The wooden plank keeping the door locked from the inside was a particular comfort that Vanya and I never had. I never really had anything to fear from anything that could open doors before. I was again and again astounded by how well armed the abandoned cabin was. The more I dug around, the more weapons I found. In addition to 3 old swords and a stringless bow, there was a cache for including an axe, a small blade, rope, and a bowstring. I put the axe under the makeshift mattress I'd assembled and kept the blade with me at all times. As the elves had suggested, I remained as quiet as I could, but it was difficult to remain quiet for what felt like days. The cabin had no windows, only slits in the walls, covered by metal. I wasn't completely sure what they were for, but I got it in my head that they were designed for shooting arrows through. I tried to peel back the metal once, but it made such a loud noise I thought I better of it immediately. Thus I was surrendered to staying quiet in a dim cabin with a single lantern. It was difficult to determine the time of the day. As a result, I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but I knew it had been at least 2 days. There was such a strange temptation to try one of the window slits again, or better, peek outside the door. One that grew stronger by the hour. The scouts hadn't been able to tell me how long it would be until they'd be able to check on me. I suppose 2 days had seemed like more than enough time, because I found it increasingly difficult to remain calm. My mind began to conjure up scenarios where the scouts had been caught, all the elves aiding in our scheme rounded up, an executioner on his way to the cabin at any given moment, or worse, I would be left out here to rot. Merely waiting until I ran out of supplies, or was finally driven out into the forest of harpies, racing for the shore where I could not swim. The mental theatrics were not helping. My eyes darted to the cabin's door. A soft, rapid tap trailed from outside the door. It moved along the wall until it stopped at the corner of the cabin. Then it began again. Having turned the corner, the tapping then made its way deeper, homing in on where I stood. I stayed as still as I could, barely daring to breathe. My eyes began to burn as I refused to blink. No further sound came. Cool. Prepare your dagger for a fight. My hand crept slowly to the dagger I kept on my person. I gripped the handle and gingerly moved my arm in pose, ready to strike. In an effort to prepare myself, I tried to imagine what was on the other side of the wall. Surely it wasn't Vade or Lace come back to check on me. This definitely was not the password we'd decided on. I began to question everything any of the elves had told me. Their motivations were surely unknown to me, and perhaps this was part of their scheme. Were they trying to provoke me? Frighten me? Or is this not an elf at all? There were no further sounds. With each breath I thought I'd provoke something from outside the wall, but nothing came. Put your ear to the wall. I crept toward where I heard the tapping last and put my ear to the wall. I'd been as quiet as I was able, but as soon as I put my ear to the wall, the tapping continued, thumping increasingly rapid. I jumped back in surprise, making a small bit of noise, but the very movement I had... The cabin's wall thumped as the thing on the other side screamed and slammed against it. I scrambled back to the center of the cabin as other voices, as loud and terrible as the first, joined in from all directions. Take initiative. I jumped as the cabin door thumped and pressed my body against the door to strengthen its resistance. The door continued to rattle without pause, multiple beings all slamming their weight against it in a frenzy. It didn't seem I had very long. I had to do something. Look for a way to flee. I'd searched the cabin thoroughly by then, and knew the front door to be its only true exit, but the elves built the cabin with latch slits in the wall, one I presumed to be used for sniping. Each of the slides was latched shut with a metal panel and about 6 inches wide. The panels were locked tight, though I noticed that one had an extra piece of metal nailed into the wall. It looked like as though it had been repaired. At that moment I decided to escape the cabin, a plan that presented multiple difficulties, the first of which was prying the panels from the walls. The second was doing so without drawing notice from whatever of the groups were at the door. Behind the seal. My eyes shifted to a plaque on the wall bearing the Galian seal. I began moving forward toward before ever realizing the suggestion had come from a voice not quite my own. It had come from a voice difficult to distinguish between the verbal and the mental. It was not my own, nor did it feel particularly foreign. I reached the plaque and found it loose enough to swing along its hinge. Behind it was a key. How did... The door gave another thump, this time accompanied by a harrowing creak of wood. I spun back around and made my way to the repaired slit. The key fit the lock, and the lock fell off. I hesitated before sliding the metal out of place, afraid of what I would see beyond. I slowly, quietly slid the metal away. A wash of relief came over me as I saw nothing but daylight and trees on the other side. I had been right in my assumption that the slit had been repaired. Gashes had been torn out of the wall at the slit, and the extra metal had been there to seal it. It was not merely locked, however, it was nailed. I could fit through the slit if the nailed metal was gone. For a moment I found myself waiting for the voice to tell me what to do next, but nothing came. Only the crashes of the door. I began to pry at the metal panel with my fingers, though predictably nothing budged. I took a deep breath and regained my focus. I needed to loosen the nails on the repaired panel. The blade I'd found before came in handy for this. I worked the nails as fast as I could, racing against an hourglass in my mind, swiftly draining and promising death. The panic began to build again when the nails refused to budge, but after a little bit of working they loosened, and finally the repair panel came loose. I could escape. I took another glance toward the door, and having the sense to distract the harpies first, I ran back to it and screamed. The harpies at the door screamed in kind, enthralled by my provocation, and feeling only momentarily successful, I snuck back to the now open slit. There was no turning back now. I slid through. My feet hit the ground and I bolted quickly toward the trees, eager to be away from the cabin before I was noticed and to find somewhere to hide. I hugged low to the ground as soon as I was out of the clearing. I stopped moving to minimize the noise. I made and tried to assess my situation. Zalaria, what are you doing? Vade's voice reached me first with a wash of relief, only hearing the words he said after I had already begun to revel in his presence. I wasn't alone any longer, after all. But then the cold awareness of what he meant hit me, just as a swift claw at my throat. What? Okay, well, I'm going to go back to that and see if I can change that ending. Oh dear, okay, maybe if I don't leave the bedroom, I'm not even sure. Okay, so we've gotten back to the part where I think, yeah, I died. So we're going to continue from here. I just changed it so that I didn't escape and just waited in silence. So, when I heard 2 taps, a pause, 3 taps, a pause, 1 tap, I nearly leapt out of bed. Zalaria? Vade! You must stay quiet. Help. As quietly as I could, I opened the door to allow Vade in. He let out a relieved sigh once he was in, then smiled briefly at me while putting the door's lock back in place. Ask him what's going on. What's going on, Vade? His eyes went wide as he turned to me and quickly shook his head. Then he moved closer to me and leaned in to whisper in my ear. There are many outside. We mustn't talk. I nodded, so he knew I understood, even as new questions sprang forth in my mind. Many outside? We both stayed quiet for a long time. He kept his eyes fixed on the door with an intense sort of focus that did nothing for my nerves. In the silence, with little to do, but to remain as still as I could, wondering just what the full nature of what was outside the cabin, I had mentally prepared a long list of questions, all of which went flying out the window when a loud knock came from the cabin door. Vade blew a breath of relief. Good. Assuming then I could finally speak, the first question in mind sprung out without much thought. Who is it? I'm not sure who it is exactly, but one of the others here to take you back into the city. There were harpies surrounding this cabin. This definitely didn't go as smoothly as Dulier thought it would. He carefully opened the door. Dulier. Vade sounded a little surprised. You're a very dependable elf in situations like these, aren't you, Vade? I'd appreciate it. I didn't do it for you. All the same, you didn't come alone, did you? He didn't come alone. He certainly didn't, as futile and affray as ever. Oh, shut up. We all know who put in the legwork here. Commander? It's Zalaria, and in one piece, that does warm a cold heart. When they told me they were keeping you out here, I thought they'd all lost their minds. It obviously worked out. Are you all right, Vaden? Yes, it was all a little too close for comfort, that's all. I'm glad Zalaria is okay. The way is clear. We shouldn't talk here. They'll regroup in a short time. He means clear in the sense that the harpies are dead. I hope you're not squeamish, majorly. I'm not. Let's go. I nodded. I'm not. Excellent. Let's go. As you say. By the time we arrived back in the city, the sun had already set, though in truth the day had been so gloomy and overcast that the difference was subtle at best. Vade had some sort of night patrol. He parted ways with us soon after we entered the city. The commander said something about not being seen with us and also took her leave. They hadn't been lying about the gore. I wasn't afforded any time to examine the mangled remains, as we were moving fast, but what I had seen left an impression. Despite the nightmare I'd lived through, the creatures having met the fate they did hang a sadness over me. They'd been so desperate, I couldn't help but guess at their reasons. Hungry? The elves certainly could have culled their numbers if they wanted to. Overpopulation of a predatory species is a problem for a predator and prey alike. But I didn't ask. I couldn't bear to just then. When we stepped into Dulier's house, he and Ernol both let out a sigh. Ernol immediately followed his with a scoff, as though perturbed that Dulier had mimicked him. Your nerves are betraying you, Dulier, as are yours, though I expect we were made nervous by different things. He is far more lethal than harpies. I guessed at who they meant, but didn't ask, uncharacteristic of me as that was. It was then I realized I hadn't said a word in a long time. You're back! Skylar burst in, her voice nervous but her expression relieved. Of course, darling, stop doubting. Doubting that you can successfully defy galas and that you can do that and keep your life? Panic isn't helping. I noticed that Harren has also been uncharacteristically quiet. Update me. Tell me what's going on. Goylois has agreed to temporarily stay his hand. Skylar, Ernol, and Harren all wore rancid expressions as though they'd just spoiled me, and I felt my stomach twist. Why? Why would he do that? He was convinced, and I'm sure you're about to elaborate. The Grand General isn't happy with the situation. We've proven ourselves antagonistic, and he'll surely meet us in kind, which is probably why the others have such dire faces. His disapproving gaze swept across the room. So yes, there will be consequences, but consequences I'm prepared for. Nor is this an investment unworthy of the risk, as some of you seem to think. After saying that, his gaze settled on Skylar. Not a risk, a certainty. You'll pay for this. Likely we all will. You're in danger now too? What is he talking about, Dulier? Don't be concerned, Zelaria. Tell me? Tell me! I spoke stubbornly and Dulier's expression softened. It is unwise to so openly move against gallows. One can go decades skirting the shadows of defiance, but crossing boldly into it draws a hard, heavy hand. As I said, I'm prepared. I expect Gallows is not surprised by my actions. Gallows seems ready to meet any who challenge him, and is no surprise who those who may challenge him are, but he prefers to wait for others to make the first move. Doing that, he minimizes the risk to his position, and he can often prevent problems from ever beginning. And so now I have made the move, so to speak. All is fair. Talking of it is a waste of time. It will all be moot if you and I prove the power of the Kuthental. I felt a new weight being strapped to me. There was certainly justice in his fate being tied to mine, but still, I felt the burden of protecting him. Dulier smiled briefly. Your concern, however, is appreciated. Goylois agreed to stay the order of execution by 12 days. Bear in mind, however, Goylois does not always keep his word. While he is not a man who betrays confidence easily, he does have a way of conjuring up sympathetic reasons to explain a change of heart. Don't count on getting the full 12 days. We don't need much time either way. All we need to do is prove our worth to Galia. Prove it so well that executing you would not net him too much to disapproval, and the risk you pose alive becomes smaller than the risk you pose dead. That's all? I hesitated for a brief second before asking what seemed the obvious question. Then how do I do that? If the Kuthental has made you stronger in some way, no true Gallian would shy away from it. The Kuthental is ours, and if it is strength, it is our strength, and one we would never deny. We would embrace it, as we should. But if you're not strong enough to draw respect from the most brutal of us, there are less grandiose and, really, smarter ways of going about things. To start with, there is a fracture in the ranks. It has been growing slowly for years now, still a ways from forcing Goylois' hand. But there is enough divide that throwing in with one or the other and gaining their support may prove too costly for Goylois to act against. You see, Madrily, we are far from the only ones to move against him. The struggle would be convincing them to quickly throw in their weight when so far all their actions have been very careful and very slow. There's also my father. Ernal scoffed loudly. It seems we have options, Zelaria. Harren suggests you pursue the divide in the forces, or go to his father. Ernal suggests going directly to the people at large. There is another option as well, a particularly bold one. I would be a fool not to hear all of the options, wouldn't I? There is a reason Garles wants to snuff you out. Something about the Kuthantor that threatens him. If it was simply a matter of pride or principle, I would think he would have avoided this entirely, but something about you threatens him. If we discover what it is he's afraid of, we can use it as leverage. Leverage? Like threatening him? If that's how you prefer to go about it, Ernal thinks you need to woo a city, but I say you need only manipulate one man. It's up to you to decide. You're letting me decide? Yes, don't you want to? Of course I want to decide. This is my fate, isn't it? My life in the end? Yes, I want to decide. I wish I could give you more time to consider the option, but time is not a friend. What do you say? Ask Harren his opinion. You've been a little quiet, Harren. Have I? His smile was warm, but his eyes seemed distant. I'm not sure. I don't like any of the options very much. But my least favourite is Dulier's plan to blackmail my grandfather. He is not an easy man to deceive, and he is stubborn and very proud. Tiptoeing around his mind and stoking the right fires to your advantage is a risky game when failure means your life, Madrilee. It already does mean your life, yes, but perhaps Dulier should inform those he advises of his past. His past? What happened? Harren sighed. He's made a mess of other people's lives plenty. I don't want you to be added to that number. He references things which have no bearing on the matter at hand. Nor do we have the time allowance to discuss it. Okay. I'll ask Ernal. I take it you think I should impress the people? Ernal nodded. You would not be trying to coerce or divide Galia. You may even further unite us. I look at it like working with the tide rather than against it, but more relevant to your interests. I think that is the only way you'll succeed. Well, I can always count on you to get to the point. He nodded again. The problem in working with the tide is that you have to keep up. There's no playing by your own rules, it's all the will of the ocean. And that's a lot to learn in a short amount of time. Your opinion? Surely you have an opinion, Skylar. Yes, I'm astounded I've managed to keep it in this long. If you must stumble after one carrot on a string after the next, you should exploit the civil divide. Change has been coming, and you might as well be. Try to be the harbinger of it. The harbinger of change, as though there were not enough pressure on me already. She shrugged bitterly. Sometimes the harbinger of change is only an unwitting human who wants to go home, I guess. Despite the pressure I felt in my chest, I managed a chortle. I know what I want to do. I want to go to the people. I'm going to show Galia what I'm worth. Are you sure? I think Lace would be best suited to help you with that. What? Ernal, with your reputation, Ernal sighed. Dulier may be right. Lace can put you where you need to be. So, you're sure of this, Zelaria? On second thought, perhaps instead... Let's try this one. I'm going to seek out the splinter in the forces. Vade has a strong connection with Commander Callie. With her support, you will have the access you need. Make sure you're certain. Okay, so I'm just trying to suss out, like, who will I talk to throughout each option I've got. So, Ernal and Harren's father. Harren said something about his father? Yes. And he shouldn't have. My father is a tricky man, but he isn't without power. and the Grand General has wanted my father dead for longer, for far more intensely than I believe he wants you dead. Point being, he has ways of avoiding that fate, assuming our father doesn't kill you himself. What? Ernal, he's not that bad. No less dangerous than any of her other options, I suppose. You still think that's a good idea, Zalaria? You must be certain. Alright, I'm gonna go with the other one that I said. This one. I am. That's it, decided, and we know what we'll do. The next morning came without any abrupt beginnings. There were no guards rushing through the halls, nor any harpies scratching at the walls. Dulier told me to expect Vade sometime before noon, that he would be over as soon as he finished with his scouting duties. He'd be working the night prior. Any attempt to enjoy the brief reprieve was fruitless. I found myself pacing the halls of Dulier's home, until eventually coming to where I always seemed to, the dining hall. Oh! Skylar wandered in just as I hid from the other end of the room. Say nothing? I watched her, both of us still, until I moved first. She followed in kind, taking a step toward the center of the room only after I had. We were having a sort of standoff? A frustrated sigh escaped her. So I hear you're enlisting Vade and, more interestingly, Callie? I nodded. You know, I sighed. What? Just because he's eager to treat you like a lost puppy, it doesn't mean you have to act like one. He's not going to be able to save you. What is your problem? What is wrong with you? She sighed dramatically. Did we go over this already? No? I don't have anything against you, but would you be content to say nothing if you were watching your friends make doomed decision after doomed decision? Your solution is? I don't have one, but your solution is that I lay down and die. Zalaria. Ah, you name him and he comes. Excuse me, you're expecting me, weren't you, Zalaria? You must be exhausted. Vade, you haven't had the chance to sleep in a while, have you? He smiled and shook his head. I'm alright, don't worry. Plenty awake. I'll leave you two to it. Her tone was skeptical in a way Vade seemed to find irritating. She left from the same door she entered. You want Callie to introduce you to Commander Lycan? Who? Commander Lycan, the unofficial leader of the division that's grown in the forces. I'll be plain. Please do. Lycan is a suspicious man who was made biding time and art form. This division has been in the making since long before I was born. He is not going to be convinced to make any dramatic movements now unless you give him something very convincing. And how? Well, therein lies the rub. I don't know what they were thinking when they suggested this. Maybe it really is the only option? The other options weren't great either. The other options weren't fantastic either. Harren and Ernal's father, some kind of attempt at blackmailing the Grand General, or appealing to the people with Lace's help. Yes, I heard about the alternatives. I'm sorry, I'm not being helpful. You know, I probably would have made the same choice as you anyway. Getting Callie to help shouldn't be too hard. I can't promise anything when it comes to her, but I think I'll be able to convince her. How are you going to manage that? He hesitated and avoided meeting my gaze. Maybe I should just follow your lead? Maybe I should just let you handle it? He gave a bitter smile. I'll do my best. But still, you should know, Callie does much for me, yes, but even so, she won't do anything just because I ask it. If she thinks this is too dangerous, either to us or Galia, well, what did we do about that? How do we prevent her from thinking that? I'm not sure. She's not without a heart. Sympathy might do us some good, but Zalaria, I'm going to do everything I can to make her do all that she can, in kind. And further assuming we get Callie's aid, we then have Lycan to convince. Lycan, I don't know what to expect, other than it will be hard. We can't rely on childhood blackmail to begin. Great. I don't really know what will sway him. I think he and Callie are after the same thing, but I've only ever seen him a handful of times. He shifted, uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Zalaria. I don't know how much I can help. I want to, though. I'll answer whatever questions I can, and I'll be here with you. I'll do whatever I can. Get some rest. I suspect we'll be up through the night. I'll be back with Callie later. I nodded. Callie wasn't as easy to convince as we'd hope. She said in no uncertain terms that she wasn't willing to lose Garlean lives, the good ones, just to save me. She agreed to bring the matter to Lycan and to help me, as long as that line wasn't crossed. Vade had likewise promised her that I'd do something to benefit the rebellion. This not something I had agreed on or even been made aware of until after he'd said it. That was a bridge to cross later, assuming I managed to avoid execution. So I'm going to leave this here, guys. It's been a long one, and I think I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. Thank you guys for watching. If you like it, please leave a like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you. Bye.